So if you guys haven't been living under a rock for the past 5 years, you've probably heard machine learning more times than you could ever count. And it seems like everyone in the CS field thinks that it's going to be the next big thing. Everyone's going to be involved in machine learning in 10 years. Every good programmer is going to be doing it. But I really beg to differ on that. So I decided to make a video on a couple of the reasons why I think machine learning is not going to be the next big thing. So first of all, it's just absolutely crazy how much people are trying to get into machine learning. At Georgia Tech, we have a concentrations program called Threads, where CS majors get to pick what kind of field to focus on. And it's slowly risen over the years to be 50% of people focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And the crazy thing is, it's not just at my school. If you go on LinkedIn, if you go on research publication sites like Archive, if you look on any kind of service where people are listing their concentrations or showing what they're focusing on, that same exact statistic will probably show up or be even more extreme, which is just insane. So over the summer while I was working at Google, one of the things that kind of confused me was that people on my team were trying to get out and into more ML exposed teams. And this was super weird because my team seemed like it would be pretty in demand. We were working on compilers, systems programming, really advanced cutting edge stuff. And yet people on my team were trying to get out of that and into ML, which I thought was just absolutely wild. Like, almost everyone in the CS field is trying to enter ML. And these are people who are experts in other areas that are high paying, have really good job opportunities and so on. So it's just crazy to kind of understand how much the pressure is moving in that direction. And in terms of my own friend group at school, it seems like almost everyone is trying to do the exact same thing. A lot of my friends are trying to get research positions with ML labs. So one of the things that's kind of blown me away is how much more work they have to put in to even get a research position. For example, I emailed a professor, showed him my resume, and met with him for about 5 minutes before he accepted me to his lab. Well, at the same time, people who are trying to get into ML labs are interviewing with 10 or 20 professors before they get anything, or not even getting a position at all. And a lot of the times it's not even a position that actually has to do with ML when they get it. So for example, one of my friends was trying to get into an ML lab with a really well-known professor. And when he finally did, he was kind of like tricked into working on stuff where he's just providing support for grad students who are doing the actual research, and all he's doing is just running tests for them and making sure that the libraries are set up. So that's something to consider for sure. And in terms of getting an actual ML job, it's crazy what the requirements are. So if you haven't noticed, a lot of people are saying get a master's, get a PhD, do whatever you can to get more research opportunities. And that's really what it takes to get into an ML job nowadays. So maybe 10 or 20 years ago is pretty reasonable for an average CS undergrad to do it. But now that it's kind of shifted to the point where only the top number of graduates are getting into these jobs. So one of the biggest components of the hype that I think has been driving this ML craze has been what people hear about pay in terms of the ML space. So you'll definitely hear a lot of things about people getting out of their PhD program making $300,000 a year working in ML. And that's awesome, that's crazy. But at the same time, you have to realize that the actual chances of getting any of these jobs is about the same as getting a job as like an L6 or an L7 at Google, where it's only like 5% of people trying to do it actually make it that far. So while it is a very lucrative field, the actual chances of making it to the point where it becomes lucrative are very, very low. And the vast majority of jobs that are titled as ML jobs are not the ones that you're hearing about where they're doing really difficult research, complex stuff. A lot of people are just doing some very like applied work in ML and getting paid a lot less, doing less interesting stuff. So you have to consider that as well. So on to the main point, I don't think that this kind of growth is sustainable. We've seen a ton of new papers come out about various different parts of the ML workflow, I guess. And while this is super cool, a lot of this stuff has been overhyped in my opinion. So if you go onto like archive.org and you look at different publications in the last year, you'll notice that something like 90% of new CS publications are in ML. But when you actually read the papers, it doesn't seem like they're doing groundbreaking research most of the time. A lot of the papers are kind of just verifying old methods, just running the same neural net on a different data set and things like that. And so it's the groundbreaking work here is a lot less pronounced than people seem to think. And it's also become the case where a lot of the papers that are getting published actually fail to be like verified by third parties. So there's third parties who will take someone else's paper, use the same data set and try to reconstruct that data. And the results can be wildly different. So it's really a lot of cherry picking that seems to go into a lot of this stuff. And it's come to the point where people are seemingly just writing papers as quick as they can without really making sure that they work. And that kind of goes to show how much the hype has come in front of the actual technology. So yeah, obviously there's stuff that's super cool, like Google's DeepMind solving Go, essentially, but there's also a lot of work where it's not so clear cut if it's new stuff or not. And a lot of people don't actually have the resources to scale up to that kind of level where they can be doing groundbreaking stuff. Google had supercomputers working on these problems, and without those kinds of resources, a lot of the stuff that you hear about is a lot less possible than what it sounds like. So in short, a lot of the research coming out of the ML community is not as groundbreaking as I think people imagine it to be. And it's important to remember that ML is never going to be a silver bullet. People kind of think that anything can be solved with ML right now, and obviously there's a lot of hype going into it with people saying like, wow, we can make self-driving cars work 90% of the way there using just machine learning, and that's super cool. But there's still problems that will never be solved with ML, and that's important to consider. And so for an example of that, self-driving works pretty well, but Tesla can only get onto the highway, and even then there's like very clear places where it just fails to work and your car warns you that it has to turn off the self-driving features. And where the gap here is, it's not in terms of the ML technology. There's stuff that ML just can't solve yet and won't be able to solve until we bring new tools to the problem. In terms of the actual work that people are doing with machine learning, it seems like a lot of it can actually get automated away with tools like Google's AutoML, which is basically just a thing where you import your data set and it trains a neural net to do the best it can to get good results out of that. So while we can do classification like that super easily now, I think that a lot of the different types of ML work are going to shift into that point. And like even talking to friends who are working ML jobs at big companies and at startups and things like that, where they have really groundbreaking stuff, a lot of it is just raw data input sitting there verifying results. It's not as much like thinking work. It's things that feel like they're going to get automated away in a few years. So I think that one of the biggest places where ML is going to fall short is that in 10 or 20 years, a lot of the jobs that people are working now are just going to be totally eliminated because we won't really need people doing this stuff. All the experts will be able to be replaced with algorithms until you get to like the very, very top. So I think that a lot of this field is going to get cut down, and it's going to be a much more rare position to get a good ML job. So at the core of the conversation, one of the questions is about what ML really is. And a lot of people start to conflate the terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, when in fact these are kind of separate fields. So originally, machine learning kind of branched out of the artificial intelligence space, where people were trying to figure out how to make intelligent computers. And they found some really good results in terms of classification and categorization, replicating data, things like that. And that's a big component, I guess, of what an intelligent computer does. But it's not really everything. So obviously, if you talk to a neural net, you can notice pretty quickly that it's not going to pass the Turing test. It doesn't really sound like a real person. And even beyond that, it's never having unique thoughts. It's kind of just repeating patterns in the data. And so what I personally think is, and what I think a lot of experts in the ML field are starting to notice, is that machine learning has kind of separated out into its own bubble from like artificial general intelligence. And I don't think that in the near future, machine learning will really get us anywhere closer to artificial general intelligence. And in fact, I think that we're going to have to see totally new research done into non-machine learning versions of artificial intelligence in order for that to happen. So while it's really cool to think about, oh, I'm going to be the person who's making computers think like people, changing the world, Terminator style, something like that, I don't think that that's actually something that any machine learning research is going to get into until we have much better technology. So I think it's important to kind of think of those two separate fields that you can go into, and not to equate the two. And an example of that is like people are going into physics research, thinking that they're going to be launching rockets for NASA, but the vast majority of physics research has nothing to do with that. But okay, let's say that you've had a really good time doing the stuff you're working on in ML. You think that the projects are super cool, everything you've done is super interesting, and you want to pursue this as a job. Now, the one thing that I really want to make clear here about the way I feel is that a lot of what people are seeing as the groundbreaking stuff, which is doing your own research, is now starting to converge. So for example, 10 years ago, we didn't have tools like TensorFlow, we didn't have PyTorch. People were sitting there making neural nets by hand. And it's come to the point where a lot of it is just configuring a pre-existing framework. And as these start to converge into tools that are used everywhere, it seems like the kind of work people are going to be doing is just data entry and like cleaning up data. So more data science stuff, more statistics stuff, but less of the actual like engineering part. And while that's not necessarily an issue in itself, it means that the kind of role of ML engineer is going to start to disappear, and things are going to be more of a trade than like a skill where you have to do research and get a PhD and things like that. And so while there will obviously be really high barriers of entry to these jobs, the actual work you're going to be doing is probably going to be a lot more limited, and the pay will go down, the amount of jobs will go down, and so on. Okay, so rant over. I know this is going to be a super controversial video, so I really want to hear your guys' input and feedback on what you think I said. I'm happy to rebut this in the comments or in a further video, but I really just want to get this conversation started because I think a lot of people are going into the ML field without really knowing what they're getting into. So I just really want to get across the point of how I feel about the field and why I'm not personally going into it, and why I think that a lot of people are making the wrong choice. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think. Please like and subscribe if you guys found this video good.